The album was originally titled Metrobolist, play on the words from the film Metropolis. But the title was very wisely changed at the last minute by Mercury Records without Bowie's consent or consultation.
Hey everybody out there, welcome back to another episode of the Audiophiles. I'm Andy, the fellow over there is John, and what we do here is we exchange music, songs to go off and listen to, and then we come back and discuss them thereafter. In today's event, I will be going off and checking out a song and artist that John is going to offer up to me. John, what's in the chamber, buddy?
So we're going back to an artist that we have been looking at in some detail, a scattergun approach. And the artist is Mr. David Bowie. And so we're going to listen to one of his tracks called The Width of a Circle.
Okay. That name is both interesting and vaguely familiar. I've probably just heard it mentioned before or something. I'm not 100% sure. But I will endeavor to go off and give this thing a spin and come back and let you know my thoughts. Okay, feedback. Nice acoustic guitar, electric guitar dynamic here. Little high bass work. There's some bass. Okay, once that beat dropped, it actually sounds very familiar to me. Not, well, very is probably a step too far, but there is some familiarity, of probably more of a vague familiarity. And yeah, I'm seeing The Man Who Sold the World. I gave this a listen thanks to Cobain and Company, what seems like a lifetime ago. So if I had heard this, it's been a while. But that doon 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 doon, that sounds familiar to me. That's where flickering light bulbs started going off in my head. But yeah, if I have, it's been a while, so this might as well be a fresh listen. So let's press on here. Ooh, rollicking.
The rumor spread that I was aging fast. Then I ran across a monster who was sleeping by a tree. And I looked and frowned, and the monster was me.
Ooh, that electric guitar. And the bass.
Well, I said hello, and I said hello. And I asked why not, and I replied, I don't know.
God damn.
So we asked a simple.
I love the energy of the song. I love that choppy, like, acoustic chord progression that's going on, and the sonic textures of the electric guitar kind of paired with it, and then that bass work happening. All that is fabulous. Yeah, it's got a lot of movement to it. Lyrically, I'm catching bits and pieces, and it sounds like a very interesting narrative, but not one that I'm able to, like, clearly discern any, like, true story from, or any real, like, cohesive narrative. We'll see what happens. Bowie loves himself some enigmatic lyrics, so we'll see what where we stand at the end of this 8-minute journey.
My bird, who is happy as can be, well, he laughed inside.
Khalil Gibran, okay.
And I cried for all the others till the day was nearly through. For I realized that God's a young man too.
Yeah. Ooh, and the bass. That's wild. Chopping away.
Oh, it said so long and away, bye-bye. And I smashed my soul and traded my mind.
Oh, it's so bouncy.
Bordello, who was vaguely half asleep, for which my reputation swept back home in drag. And the morals of his magic spell negotiate my hide, when God did take my logic for a ride. Riding along.
Ready to downshift a little bit here. Down, 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 down. Nice callback. Ooh. This choral vocalization. Dun, dun, dun.
He swallowed his pride and puckered his lips. They showed me the leather bound round his hips.
Okay.
My knees were shaking, my cheeks aflame. He said,
Oh,
you'll
my.
never go down to the gods again. He struck the ground, the cabin appeared. And I smelled the burning pit of fear. He crashed 1,000 yards below. I said, do it again, do it again. His nebulous body.
This is really interesting. The lyrics that I'm catching shot around from what sounded like homoeroticism to some sort of encounter with an otherworldly being. I have no idea. None of this is much of a surprise coming from David Bowie, but I'm sure when this first came out, people were like, what the hell is he talking about? And to be fair, those sentiments, what the hell is he talking about? They ring true to me right now, but I'm not exactly taken aback if by any of the subject matter that I just alluded to, given who we're talking about here. But let's take that back a little bit and see what if I can catch some of the stuff. God, this is an epic tune.
You swallowed his pride and puckered his lips.
Yeah, puckered his lips.
Show me the leather bound round his hips.
Yeah.
My knees were shaking, my cheeks aflame. He said, you'll never go down to the gods again. He struck the ground, the cabin appeared. And I smelled the burning pit of fear.
Yeah.
The crash of 1,000 yards below. I said, do it again, do it again. His nebulous body swayed above. His tongue swollen with devil's love.
Ooh.
A snake and high, a venom high. I said, do it again, do it again. Breathe, breathe, breathe deeply. And I was seething, breathing deeply.
This bass work.
Century horned and tail. Waiting for you.
Oh. Oh, do. Yeah, wow, what a journey that was. Yeah, this thumbnail. If it wasn't for this guitar head, like, poking out, it would look like Mr. Bowie is winding up to throw his best four-seam fastball right down the middle. It's just the baseball head in me, I suppose, seeing that. This was so fun and rollicking, and there were so many movements and changes thereof throughout it, and that can like really leave everything open for, you know, loose or poor transitions, but that's not the case here. Everything seemed to transition smoothly from one part to the next, despite tempo changes and sort of falling back of certain instruments and the predominance of other instruments. Everything was pretty seamless in that regard, despite there being a lot of moving parts and changes throughout it. So hats off to them for how well arranged and composed it was. It sounded fabulous. I mean, every time that lead guitarist wanted to step into the spotlight, he was nearly overshadowed by the bass work that accompanied it. It sounded so great. The drums were really nice and splashy as well. The dynamic between the acoustic and the electric guitar was really great. Bowie's voice sounded fabulous on this. It usually does. I don't, be hard pressed to find an example of him not sounding great in a track. And for how long it was, it really went by without feeling like, it dragged on. Now, I think part of that is because of the movements, and I also that it has kept everything fresh, right? But it was just so goddamn good, too. Like, the electric guitar, like those lead guitar parts and the rhythm section, keeping everything moving and interesting. God, the bass work in this was really fabulous. I'm afraid to even call it, like, the unsung hero of the song, because it seems pretty obvious to me that it's one of the standout pieces from this track. The lyrics are wildly interesting that I caught, but again, from start to finish, I can't really piece together a sound narrative. There's these allusions to like almost a standoff between God and some more you know like the lascivious dark entity, whether that's the devil or a demon of some sort, and sort of Bowie seemingly caught in between. I don't know. Maybe literally or from a moral standpoint, he feels this way. Almost like it's his way of illustrating this confusion that he's in. Now I know that Mr. Bowie definitely has played for both teams throughout his lifetime. So I don't know if that's what it's an allusion to. There was clearly some, a male figure puckering his lips, and then the leather around his hips, and the do it again, do it again. Definitely had some sexual connotation behind it, or at least that's how I interpreted it. I don't want my knowledge of some of Bowie's sexual exploits to poison the well of my interpretation. But that's sort of the vibe I got. I don't know. I could be wildly off base here. But I do, this song did ring somewhat familiar to me, and given how goddamn good it is, I'm almost like, shame on me for not having gone back to and listened to it more. This album, that is, and clearly this track too. Yeah, I'm really interested. One, I'd love to know who the musicians were who featured along with Bowie on this, because they all did a stellar job. But I'd also love to know a bit more about this very interesting, evocative, provocative lyrical content that he has spun up in this track. So I'm sure John can shed light on that, among many other things. So let's get back to him and find out a bit more.
This may be recorded for training purposes. He's back. So you had to listen to David Bowie, Width of a Circle. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, I will say right out of the gate, for a song that is slugged with the 8+ minute timestamp, this thing actually went by really quickly. And I chalk that up to how well arranged it was and composed, because there's a lot of changes throughout this song. And because of that, it keeps everything feeling pretty fresh. So this was kind of over a lot more quickly than I had anticipated. It just felt like it moved by a lot more quickly. So kudos to him and his cohorts for pulling that off. Sometimes a 8-minute song can feel like an 8-minute song, or sometimes even more than that. So yeah, this thing flew by nicely with a lot of great different moving parts throughout it. So I really enjoyed it. Also, the thumbnail, if it wasn't for the headstock of the guitar peeking up over his shin, it would have looked like he was winding up for this great 4-seam fastball in baseball or something like that, equipped with a leg kick and everything. So I was like, whoa, okay, he's playing guitar. I see now. What the hell's he doing here? I also noticed that it said "The Man Who Sold the World" on the I assume that's the album cover. I actually, and as the opening little guitar motif came into focus, sort of realized that this is vaguely familiar to me, and I think I can thank Cobain and Company and MTV and that performance for having inspiring me to go check this out. What seems like a fucking lifetime ago. So a little bits of recollection here and there, but this might as well have been a fresh listen for me. So, but I just, for the sake of transparency here. So things kick off with some feedback and picking through of this guitar notation that, as it comes into focus, is that oh no, 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 and that's, I'm like, okay. And then they call back to that later in the song, which is just an excellent use of calling back to the very beginning. So I really enjoyed that when we got to that part as well. It sounds like the electric guitar is joined by its acoustic cousin, and there's some light and seemingly distant percussive work, perhaps in the form of the hi-hat, it sounds like. By the 38-second mark, things appear to have fully unfolded as the beat proper drops along with this nice thudding bass, and more on that later. And now the guitars seem more intent and filled with a bit more purpose and confidence. 10 seconds later, and the electric guitar motif shifts into this more rhythmic progression that has some really nice choppy bounce to it. And with this shift marks the entry of Mr. Bowie's vocal delivery. And from what I can catch in the narrative that he's spinning here, is that it's filled with some really interesting lines, despite the fact that I'm not really able to put them together into this cogent, linear kind of narrative. But I believe he starts with "in the corner of the morning in the past," which is such a cool line to like set up this, in this thing that's maybe buried in the recesses of my memory from a time that's past. And it's just a really interesting way to kind of like cut to the chase, or lead me to envision that he's kind of pulling from the depths of his memory. He says, "In the corner of the morning in the past, I would sit and blame the master first and last," which sounds like he's blaming like whatever god he prays to, or whatever, which is a really interesting. Again, just that opening salvo is a set of captivating lines there. My attention is also being pulled from this tale, I must admit, by the brightness of the acoustic strumming and that rollicking bass work that are both shining at this point. And in the second verse, Bowie continues to recount the story, and in it he makes allusions to this, what seems like an inner dialogue from my perspective. He greets himself. There's this exchange with his own person, and then he questions something of himself, to which he then responds. So again, this inner back and forth that he's going on here. And there's also a mention of a blackbird and Khalil Gibran out of fucking left field here. Okay, and the revelation that God is a young man too, which to me sounded so much like he was drumming up an excuse, or trying to give himself a hall pass, or rationalize his past indiscretions by being like, hey, even God was a young fella, unbridled and untethered, so why can't I be? Which, good luck with that. So after a couple repetitions of the musical motif after the second verse, we get treated to the sonic blast of some really nice lead guitar as it winds and bends and hammers and trills and gets warbly at times. Also worth mentioning how nice and splashy the drums were while all this was going on, really keeping a great beat. But if I'm going to bring up the one half of the rhythm section, I need to draw attention again. And I know it's insert eye roll here, because I'm going to talk about the bass some more. But the bass player did not seem content in letting the lead step into the spotlight on his own. Like, it felt like he had to be part of that too. And at points, it sounded like they were playing the same damn motif on each of their instruments, but one did just markedly lower than the other, but it sounded very much like the same thing. And it sounded fucking awesome too. So I really, really enjoyed that. Third verse kicks off, and the bass work is absolutely killing it. Bowie claims to have gotten laid by a young bordello, which is a bit of a surprise to me, because whenever I thought of the word bordello from a noun perspective, I always thought it was among the places and not the people. Unless, of course, he's saying the entire staff of a bordello, had his way with him, which, Jesus, what a hell of a night that must have been. And then at one point, he seems to chalk up the decision to God taking his logic for a ride, which, by the way, if anyone out there is listening, and has used that excuse or explanation with their significant other in the past, I'd love to know how that went over. So please, answers on a postcard, because I can only imagine if I tried to pull that off in the Branch household, it would go off like a fart in church. So after this verse, we get more of this excellent bass work. I know that's a reoccurring theme here. And it's flying around, and then it seems like things are slowing down a bit as the song shifts to the next motif. And then around the 420 mark in the music, everything save for the acoustic kind of cuts out. Now, at times they make little appearances during this part, but the only consistent member of the band still going at it is the acoustic. And the other musicians slowly crawl back into frame, with Bowie's voice eventually joining and calling out this like vowel vocalization that sounds very choral. Um, and around the 5:37 mark, things begin to change as the bass starts like peppering in these staccato eighth notes. And with Bowie delivering the next stanza shortly thereafter. Again, not catching all these lyrics, but it definitely has more than just a touch of like this homoerotic imagery. And I know enough about Bowie to know that he's happily played both sides throughout his sexual awakening throughout his life. So this doesn't really come as much as a surprise, but I'm again trying to put it all together. But also mixing in with these lyrics are like what sound like an allusion to this otherworldly being or like a demon or devil or something. So I caught bits about puckered lips and a leather belt around his hips, with shaky knees and flushed cheeks. So this is all that like sort of homoerotic imagery that I was alluding to. And I think even he says like do it again or something like that, which sounded like um this primordial sexual pleasure was derived and he wants to experience it again. But again, there's talk of a burning pit and mentions of like the devil's love and something horned and tailed. So it's an interesting, dynamic going on here that I'm trying to piece together, and I'm having a hell of a time putting it into words that are both that convey what I interpreted and are also politically correct. So I'm sure you will help me make sense of it all, of all this wild imagery Bowie has painted to this point. And at the 6:40 mark, we get another rendition of some really great lead work shooting around the soundscape, and this coupled with more great bass work. And this carries on excellently until the 7:27 mark. And there's this transition via the drum fill that marks a change in tempo. More of this choral Bowie vowel vocalization appears after this slowed down portion that carries us to the end of the track. So yeah, this was very interesting musical venture that you sent me on. It was also nice to kind of dig at this. It's not like picking a scab. It was like picking a scar. That's how long it's been since I've listened to this. But I really did enjoy giving it another go, and I'm kind of like slapping myself on the back of the hand for not having gone back to it sooner, because this is a fucking 8-minute epic. I really enjoyed the shit out of it. The narrative, whilst not making a lot of cohesive sense to me, was riddled with this wildly interesting imagery, no question about it. So that really piqued my interest too, despite not really being able to put together a full understanding of what it was about. So yeah, this is a great tune filled with excellent musicianship, and that enigmatic approach to lyricism that we can always, it's been a calling card of Bowie since really day one. So please tell me more, John.
So that, Andy, yeah, some interesting things here. As we said at the top of the show, we listened to a few Bowie tracks now. So there's a playlist. I'll put the link in below. If you go to the first one, I'll add in saying there's a bit more about his career, but I'm trying to just fill in the gaps as we go along, and I'm scattergun, as I say. So it is about what's going on at this point in his career, and it might be future, past, whatever. As it so happens, this is like directly after some of the stuff we listened to before. So this is from the man who sold the world, as you said before, third studio album. So early days, 1970. And it's described in genres as hard rock, blues rock, folk rock, and psychedelic rock, anything with rock at the end. And it was produced by his long-term collaborator, Tony Visconti. And the album features the first appearances on a Bowie record of future Spiders from Mars members Mick Ronson and Mick Woodmansey. The album was originally titled Metrobolist, play on the words from the film Metropolis. But the title was very wisely changed at the last minute by Mercury Records without Bowie's consent or consultation. So the situation is, after he did his first couple of albums, and he got a hit with Space Oddity. Philips Records, it was signed to then, failed to promote that album. So all the attention he garnered from Space Oddity had dissipated, and his follow-up single, The Prettiest Star, failed to chart. He knew that his potential as riding that wave as a solo artist was dwindling. So he formed a band called Hype with bassist Tony Visconti, John Cambridge on drums, and the guitarist Mick Ronson, who Bowie had met in February of that year, 1970. And so the group's performances, they actually started wearing these flamboyant superhero-like costumes. So this is the start of glam rock.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
some of the sort of stuff going on. Cambridge was dismissed from Hype at the end of March and replaced by Mick Woody Woodmansey. And by April, the four members were living in Haddon Hall, Beckenham, which is an Edwardian mansion that are converted into flats. And it was described by one visitor as having an ambience like Dracula's living room. Imagine. So they knocked up a studio in the flats there for a demo thing, but then they started recording The Man Who Sold the World in London studios in April 1970. And it continued. He went to a couple of different studios back and forth, but continued to the end of May. So 4 to 6 weeks tops to do the whole album. Ralph Mace, who was a concert pianist and the head of the classical musical department at Mercury Records, was hired to play a Moog synthesizer. So the lineup for this album was Bowie, lead and backing vocals, 12-string acoustic guitar, stylophone. Mick Ronson, lead and rhythm guitar, acoustic guitar, backing vocals, recorder, piano. Tony Visconti, bass, backing vocals, recorder. There's a couple of songs got do recorder, and it's really hilarious. Mick Woodmansey, drums, timpani, percussion, and Ralph Mace, Moog. So the bass you heard was actually the producer, Tony Visconti.
Yeah.
And he plays a hell of a bass on this album. He really does.
Shit.
And then he's replaced, and he continues just to produce. But talent lost there, I think.
Yeah, really.
So during this time, Bowie had terminated his contract with his manager Pitt, and he'd met his future manager Tony DeFries. With Bowie preoccupied with his new wife Angie and all these managerial issues, the music was largely arranged by Ronson and Visconti. Although Bowie was officially credited the composer of all the music on the album, the author Pete Doggett quoted Visconti as saying that the songs, in quote, were written by all four of us. We'd jam in the basement and Bowie would just say whether he liked them or not. In Doggett's narrative, the band, sometimes with Bowie contributing guitar, sometimes not, will record an instrumental track, which might or might not be based on the original Bowie idea. Then, the last possible moment, Bowie would reluctantly uncurl himself from the sofa on which he was lounging with his wife and dash off a set of lyrics. Conversely, Bowie said in 1998, I really did object to the impression that I didn't write the songs on The Man Who Sold the World. You only have to check out the chord changes. Nobody writes chord changes like that. The width of the circle and the Superman, for example, were already in existence before the sessions began. So the album itself was released with a different cover work in USA and UK. So, because there's some controversy. For the USA, the album was like a cartoon drawing by Michael J. Weller of a cowboy in front of an insane asylum. The UK version, which was shot by Keith McMillan, features Bowie wearing this famous Michael Fish designed blue dress. It's a man's dress, and that was just unbelievable for the Americans. They wouldn't countenance it at all. And then a 1972 reissue by RCA Records featured a black and white picture of Bowie in his then current character Ziggy Stardust. That's the kiddie there, and it's so Bowie. It is sort of pantomime almost. It's great. The opening track, "The Width of a Circle," is an 8-minute epic. It says here that delves into progressive rock. That dirty word. Originally debuted in 1970 at a BBC session, the song is led by Ronson's widely lauded guitar work, using feedback and improvisation throughout. The lyrics reference the Lebanese poet Gehil Gibran, and in the song's second half, the narrator has a sexual encounter with God in the Devil's Lair. Biographer Nicholas Pegg describes the song's sound as reminiscent of Deep Purple and Black Sabbath. There you go. The Man Who Sold the World has been retrospectively described by Bowie's biographers and commentators as the beginning of Bowie's artistic growth. Many consider it the first album where he began to find his own sound. David Buckley described it as the first Bowie album proper, and Enemy wrote, "This is where the story really starts." So Pegg finds it one of the best and most important albums in the history of rock music.
Mm.
In 2013, readers' poll for Rolling Stone, it was voted Bowie's 10th greatest album.
Oh.
But Bowie's 10th greatest is still, you know.
Yeah,
The album has been praised for the band's performance and the unsettling nature of its music and lyrics.
no
In
shit.
a review, AllMusic complimented its tight, twisted, heavy guitar rock that appears simple on the surface but sounds more gnarled upon each listen. Musically, there isn't much time for innovation, but there's an unsettling edge to the band's performance, which makes the record one of Bowie's best albums. Um, Pitchfork called the album the dark horse of Bowie's catalogue. Comparing The Man Who Sold the World to its predecessor, they praised the arrangements as tougher and more effective and complimented his artistic growth. Yeah, I will say I really like this album. It is him finding his feet and his sound. That you mentioned right at the start, the electric guitar, the acoustic guitar is a sound that he uses a lot, particularly in like Ziggy Stardust, The Rise and Fall, but in others as well. But it's a really nice sound. You've got elements of like he's moving away from the sort of folky and the musical type stuff into this rockier period, and he's finding his way, which will then become like Hunky Dory and Ziggy and etc. But yeah, I think this is a really good album. It's got some really high points in it. This is a great killer opening. The lyrics: in the corner of the morning in the past, I would sit and blame the master, first and last. All the roads were straight and narrow, and the prayers were small and yellow, and the rumour spread that I was aging fast. Then I ran across a monster who was sleeping by a tree. I looked and frowned, and the monster was me. Well, I said hello, and I said hello, and I asked why not, and I replied, I don't know. So he asked a simple blackbird who was as happy as could be when he laughed insane and quipped, Khalil Gibran. That's mad. So I cried for all the others till the day was nearly through, for I realised that God's a young man too. And I put in brackets here, guitar seizure.
Nice way of describing it, actually.
Mick Ronson, I bloody love his guitar work, and it's just
I
a brilliant
I love how
early.
you mentioned the improvisation of it all, because you could hear that, you could hear it was clearly someone who knew their fucking instrument, but it felt just conjured. You know what I mean? And not like it didn't feel contrived in any way, shape, or form or premeditated.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I said so long, and I waved bye bye, and I smashed my soul and traded my mind. Got laid by a young bordello. You definitely picked the wrong word there. I was vaguely half asleep, for which my reputation swept back home in drag. And the moral of this magic spell negotiates my hide when God did take my logic for a ride, riding along. Instrumental break, as you say, goes back into that main riff, down, 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 which is a lovely, lovely riff.
Yeah, it
And then
is.
it breaks down into sort of folky part where he does that,
Yeah.
and then it goes into the glam rock, ding, 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 ding. He swallowed his pride and puckered his lips and showed me the leather belt around his hips. My knees were shaking, my cheeks aflame. He said, "You'll never go down to the gods again." And the band, in brackets, go, "Turn around, go back." He struck the ground, a cavern appeared, and I smelt the burning pit of fear. We crashed 1,000 yards below. I said, "Do it again, do it again. Turn around, go back." His nebulous body swayed above, his tongue swollen with devil's love. The snake and I, a venom high. I said, "Do it again, do it again. Turn around, go back." Breathe, breathe, breathe deeply. And I was seething, breathing deeply, a spitting sentry, horned and tailed, waiting for you. And then we go to the rocking guitar, and then and then into the sort of folky instrumental out. So yeah, there's lots of debate. There's clearly some shenanigans going on.
Yeah.
He's starting to get wrapped. You've got initially this kind of almost sort of Tolkien scene of him, or even Narnia or something. He's slipping
Yeah.
off and meeting a talking blackbird and stuff like that, and then it becomes dark turn, and
Yeah.
it's like almost South Park, Sex with the Devil, God knows what's going on down there, but yeah, very interesting. So after the completion of Man Who Sold the World, Bowie became less active in both the studio and on stage, which is weird for him. In August 1970, Visconti parted ways with Bowie, owing to his dislike of his manager, De Vries, and the frustration with Bowie's lack of enthusiasm during the making of the album. It was the last time he would see the artist for 3 or 4 years, and then subsequently just did loads. Ronson and Woodmansey also departed due to other personal conflicts with Bowie. Um, it didn't really do that well, the album, and critically, it wasn't really seen as any big shakes in this country, though the Americans loved it a lot more. And that critical success of Man of the World in America prompted Mercury to send Bowie on a promotional radio tour of the country in February 71. Upon his return from America, he wrote the majority of the material, which would then appear on follow-up albums Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust 71 and 72. So he gets that sort of energization from other American sort of influences is going around, because he was a bit like that, this sort of sponge. And then
Yeah,
suddenly this burst of, I mean, the songs on Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust are just amazing. And in terms of the most accessible, almost poppy, Changes, Life on Mars, all of those stuff. And then, Ziggy obviously and all that stuff. Starman, incredible.
yeah. I've
He got back
always,
together.
I
Go
was
on.
just going to say, I've always appreciated Bowie's outsider's perspective when it's come to America. And to hear that this like inspired his first real tour of it, and knowing how observant he is, and what a sort of this empath that he is, like he just takes in everything and feels things and really articulates his perspective of those things really well. I've watched so many interviews from way back then where he's saying some really interesting things that some people here are probably turned off by, but I think are actually really interesting. And it's always good to have an outsider's perspective. Sometimes it helps you with the forest for the trees and all that shit. He's always been a really good voice when it's come to that, from what I've heard anyway. You know what I mean? And so it's really cool to see him see things that maybe he doesn't like, and see and hear things that he really does, and to use all of that as an inspiration for future albums and stuff like that, which it sounds like is what went down.
Yeah, definitely. And then he does it again, later on with like Young Americans. And I don't remember the exact statistics, but I think he's was either one or if not the first white actor to appear on like Soul Train and stuff like that, which is
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
He called it Plastic Soul, but he did a pretty good job. But
yeah.
anyway, so yeah, he got back together with Ronson and Woodmansey, and they returned to play on both of those two albums, Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust, and along with them with bassist Trevor Bolder, who Visconti went off to production activities. They became famous as the Spiders from Mars. So this album has been cited as inspiring goth rock, dark wave, and science fiction elements of work by artists such as Susie and the Banshees, The Cure, Gary Newman, more on that later, John Fox from Ultravox we mentioned before, and Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
It has been claimed that glam rock began with the release of Man Who Sold the World, although it is disputed because it's also attributed to Mark Bolan's appearance as T-Rex on Top of the Pops in March 1971, wearing glitter on his face, and those two things are both like seen as but yeah. I think they're both massive drivers of it. So yeah, I thought this is really interesting, really early. It's Bowie finding his feet and getting his first real Bowie sound, as it were, rather than aping what's around him. So this is really, it's just a cool song, and for a lot of
Yeah.
people, it was one of their favorite Bowie songs. It's up there for a lot of people.
And it makes sense. It's a good one, and it's interesting also that you mentioned it's the opening track, because what a fucking way to open up an album than with this, as I called it earlier, this 8-minute epic of a track that
Yeah,
they've got.
definitely get your attention, wouldn't it?
Oh, without
Uh,
question.
Great. All right. Well, I shall wrap things up. Thanks for listening to this, Andy.
Thank
Folks
you.
out there, please, if you like it, please do hit the like button and show your love in a way that you not necessarily the same as what Bowie did. Anyway,
Unless that's your thing.
uh, yeah, please drop some comments as well. Your experiences of Bordellos. love to hear from you. What you think of the song as well. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. And all earthly pleasures will be yours. That said, thanks again so much for watching, and we'll see all of you in the next episode of The Audiophiles.
See you later, guys.